foregone conclusion that Caleb Williams is going to be the #1 pick in the draft?
I mean, teams trade to get to that #1 spot, to get their opportunity to take a Caleb Williams. Think about staying in college because he doesn't want to go to one of these terrible franchises.
In the past, anytime you have the opportunity to become the #1 overall pick in the NFL draft, historically it's always been a no-brainer to declare for the NFL draft. But the college football landscape and the amateur sports landscape has changed completely over the past few years. And now, what was once deemed as a certainty may not be so certain anymore. So before we get to the content, make sure you drop a like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to help the channel grow. Now that we got all that out of the way, work! I haven't proved myself to you at this point, then check this out. On Thursday Night Football, these are all the people that made money by following my prize picks for free on Instagram. I give out my picks for free each and every night, and if you end up tailing me and hit green, I shout you out like this. Right now, when you use my promo code microphone, you could double your deposit up until $100 on Prize Picks. And thank you, Prize Picks, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Caleb Williams is the greatest NFL prospect since Trevor Lawrence. Which, yeah, I know, it seems like we have a brand new one of those once every 2 years. But there's a significant difference between Caleb Williams' college experience and Trevor Lawrence's college experience. There's never been a better time to be a collegiate sports athlete, because college sports stars have never had more leverage now. We've come a very long way from the days of destroying, getting kicked off of his football team for having a successful YouTube channel. Now these young athletes are leveraging their brand and the clout that they generate from playing in front of nationally televised audiences to create businesses for themselves. These businesses could guarantee generational wealth. And now, instead of having to hide the fact that you could potentially drive an expensive car in college, now Caleb Williams could flash a luxury car and not hide it, because it's very well known that he is one of the top 5 highest earners when it comes to NIL deals. And what was once seen as a potential opportunity to make some extra money in college has become so lucrative that there might not be a reason to rush to the NFL anymore. In years past, these college students would want to play professional football as soon as possible so they could earn money for their talent. They didn't want to risk any chances of them staying in the college game and getting injured or potentially hurting their draft stock. Now it's significantly different. If you take a look at the On3 NIL 100, in the top 5, you have Bronny James, Shedeur Sanders, Livvy Dunne, Arch Manning, and Caleb Williams. Bronny is worth almost $6 million, Shedeur is worth $4 million, Livvy is worth $3.3 million, Arch is worth $2.8 million, and Caleb Williams is worth $2.7 million. Underneath all of them is none other than Travis Hunter, who's at $2.2 million. The reason why this is significant is you could potentially earn more money staying in college football as opposed to going to the NFL. And so far, it seems like a lot of stars in college football understand this very well. A few months ago, we made a video on how Deion Sanders said that his son, Shedeur Sanders, isn't going anywhere.
What if he goes to the NFL?
Yeah, we don't want to talk about that. So we've discussed every possible scenario that can be had. I don't want to be two to nobody. He don't get down like that, because now with NIL and who they are, you could make just as much money here as you can there.
And at the time, Deion Sanders said that the reason is simple. Shedeur Sanders wants to go #1. He doesn't want to go #2 to Caleb Williams, which, if there's anything that was proven over this past year, it's that being the #2 pick in the NFL draft isn't the worst thing after all. Now, with all that being said, historically, it was a foregone conclusion that if you had the opportunity to be the #1 overall pick in the NFL draft, you do it. The only situation where we've seen a player who was good enough to be the #1 overall pick in an NFL draft that decided to come back recently was none other than Andrew Luck. Could you imagine if Andrew Luck played for the Panthers instead of the Indianapolis Colts? He might have still been playing right now. I guess in hindsight, we could look back and say that may have been a horrific mistake, but it's tough to say for sure. So with all that being said, a lot of people are wondering what Caleb Williams' decision is. He's won a Heisman Trophy. He had a horrible season this past year, and he already seems to be very much aware of what his value is, famously pulling one of the most insane power moves I think I've ever seen as a sports fan, saying he expects partial partial ownership from any NFL team that plans to select him in the 2024 NFL Draft. Now, this isn't something new. I mean, Aaron Rodgers tried to do the same thing with the New York Jets, but the NFL banned it from happening. The NFL doesn't like partial ownership from players, and if you really think about it, it's one of the most bizarre asks that we've ever seen in the history of sports. A player that has yet to play a single down for the team that is selecting him is asking for partial ownership in the NFL. That's what NIL deals are doing to these college students. And hey, I applaud and appreciate the entrepreneurial spirit, but it just shows you how much times have changed. 5 years ago, Kyler Murray had the opportunity to be selected #1 overall in the NFL Draft, and he screwed over the baseball team that selected him within the top 10 of the MLB Draft in order to chase his dream. Now you're having players saying that you need to convince me in order to declare for the NFL Draft because I'm making good money here. But that's not the only thing. Caleb Williams is really using his leverage in this instance, saying in September he would not play for specific teams. According to his father, the way the system is constructed, you could go to the worst possible situation, the worst possible team, the worst organization in the league because of their desire for parity gets the first pick. So it's the gift and the curse. I mean, I've talked to Archie Manning. His career was shot because he went to a horrible organization. I've talked to Lincoln Riley, and Kyler Murray struggled because of where he was drafted. Baker Mayfield struggled mightily because of where he was drafted. I don't really agree with any of those examples except for Archie Manning. His career did get screwed because of where he was drafted, but Kyler Murray had a shoddy offensive line during his rookie year, but still played really well, and then the Arizona Cardinals got him DeAndre Hopkins. Terrible example. Baker Mayfield came in and juiced up the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns literally listened to everything he said. He endorsed Freddie Kitchens. Freddie Kitchens got hired. They brought in Odell Beckham Jr., and he led them to a playoff victory. But the Cleveland Browns just didn't commit to him. I don't think those are good examples at all. But I do think the Archie Manning example makes a lot of sense, and I think the latest example we can make here is none other than Bryce Young. I am a firm believer that if CJ Stroud went to the Carolina Panthers, he would be maybe performing slightly better than Bryce Young is, but the situation Bryce Young is in is just terrible. He is on the worst team behind the worst offensive line with one of the worst wide receiver cores, with one of the worst owners who recently publicly said that the plan was to potentially take CJ Stroud at #2.
No, it's been reported and we talked about it. Originally, we were going to go to the #2 pick, and we thought we would get CJ because we thought the Texans were going to pick Bryce. And listen, we preferred Bryce. He was our #1 pick. We had a lot of conviction. You know, in answer to your questions, it's just not the way the process was done. The process was done the way the process was done. And for me, I'm totally confident in agreeing with that pick.
I agree with Caleb Williams' father. The situation that you get drafted in, it makes all the difference. But here's where things get really tricky. Typically, the team that has the #1 overall pick is a truly horrific team that has a horrible future ahead of themselves. But this year, at least as of now, the team that has the #1 overall pick would be able to set up Caleb Williams for instant success. The Chicago Bears defense is very much up and coming. They could probably trade Justin Fields for like a second-round pick, and there will be teams that would be interested in Justin Fields. But on top of that, they have a 4th-round pick and a wide receiver 1 that's already on the roster. As far as situations go for a potential #1 overall pick in the NFL Draft, I have to say that this is one of the better ones. So although it could be very tempting if you're Caleb Williams to sit back in college, party it up while you're getting paid millions of dollars, which to be honest sounds like a dream to me. Can you imagine getting paid millions and millions of dollars while you're in college, while you're a student athlete, while you're that young? It sounds like a lot of fun. And if you're able to leverage the amount of capital that you get, you can set yourself up for life without even going to the NFL. But that would be appealing for a player like, say, Spencer Rattler, who just recently declared for the NFL Draft, but his future is very murky to say the least. He could end up being a great player in the NFL. He could end up being terrible. A player like that should try to make the most out of his NIL evaluation, not a player that could potentially go #1 overall. I think at the end of the day, the Chicago Bears call you up and say, hey, we want to take you at #1 overall, then you should declare. But if you're in a situation where, say, I don't know, the New York Giants want to trade up to the #1 overall pick to select you, or possibly the New England Patriots want to move up to the #1 overall pick to take you, which nothing against the Giants or the Patriots, playing for Bill Belichick typically would be a coveted situation, but after seeing what he did with Mac Jones, I'm not necessarily sure anymore, and I feel like the Patriots have significant significant holes aside from the quarterback position. Quite literally, every single part of the Patriots is a weak spot except for running back and defensive back, in my opinion. So that could be a recipe for disaster. And the New York Giants also have some holes that they need to fill before they select their quarterback of the future. But if the Chicago Bears are willing to move on from Justin Fields to take you, why wouldn't you declare? You would be placed in the perfect position to succeed, especially if you're in a scenario where they could take an offensive lineman to help you at number 4 or trade number 4 for additional capital. Either way, in years past, I felt like Caleb Williams' decision was going to be obvious. But what's crazy is nowadays you're seeing players literally negotiate with teams for the opportunity to return for one more year. Apparently, Marvin Harrison Jr. could command record-breaking money if he was to stay in college for another season, meaning Marvin Harrison Jr. could potentially get double digits in the millions to stay at Ohio State. It's definitely a wild time to be a football fan. I'll make sure to keep you guys posted on what Caleb Williams' decision is. If you were Caleb Williams, what would you do? Would you stay at USC for another season and earn NIL money, or would you declare for the NFL draft? I'd like to hear what you have to say. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.